Hey everyone, and welcome to Valley of Secrets. I'm your host, Nikki Ruth. Today's story takes us back to Friday the 13th in 1995, a date that still carries a chill for people in the Fraser Valley. In the quiet city of Abbotsford, two teenage girls were attacked in the early morning hours. One of them was left for dead, and the other vanished. And this isn't just another headline for me. It hits really close to home, literally. Abbotsford is just one town over from where I grew up, and at the time, I was the same age as these girls. I remember this case vividly, the fear that swept through the community. Suddenly, walking the streets after dark didn't feel safe anymore. And for kids, curfews got stricter, parents were terrified, and for the first time, we felt that horrible truth that something so violent, so random could happen right here. Two best friends whose lives changed forever on a damp October night in Abbotsford. This is the story of Tanya Smith and Misty Cockerell. It's 5:30 in the morning on October 14th, 1995. At MSA Hospital in Abbotsford, the emergency doors slam open. A teenage girl stumbles inside. Her hair is sticky with blood, her clothes are ripped, and her face is swollen almost beyond recognition. She is screaming. According to the docuseries The Devil You Know, her skull has been fractured so violently that the doctors later describe it as leaving a fist-size hole in her head. Her arm is broken, and her finger is shattered. This girl has been bludgeoned within an inch of her life, and somehow she has walked nearly a kilometer, almost 10 minutes on foot, from where she was attacked to the hospital doors. Nurses rush to her, and she collapses into their arms. Her name is Misty Cockerell, 17 years old, and she has survived one of the most savage attacks Abbotsford has ever seen. But survival doesn't come easy. Misty's fight for her life was only beginning. Through the haze of pain and confusion, Misty manages to tell doctors and police that she hadn't been alone that night. Her best friend, Tanya Smith, had been with her, and Tanya is missing. Abbotsford in 1995 wasn't the bustling city it is now. It still felt like a farm town, cornfields stretching out along the highway, dairy barns along the back roads, kids riding bikes down quiet suburban streets. It was also called the Bible Belt of BC because churches are on nearly every corner in this city. Families piling into pews every Sunday. People knew their neighbors. It wasn't the kind of place where you thought about murder. And maybe that's why what happened that October rattled the community so deeply. October 13th, 1995, a Friday. It is one of those damp Fraser Valley fall days. A light drizzle leaves sidewalks slick, the air smells of wet leaves. By nightfall, the temperature dips into single digits. Cold enough to zip up your jacket, but nothing unusual for October. At 2 a.m., the city is quiet. Streetlights buzz against the mist, casting pale circles of light. A car hisses past now and then, and tires cut through damp pavement. Otherwise, silence. For Tanya and Misty, it is like any other Friday night. Tanya, 16, phones her mom around 10 p.m. to ask if she can sleep over at Misty's house, which her mother had already said no to. But like most teenagers, she begs her mom, stating that Misty was going away for 2 weeks and she wanted one last sleepover before she left. Her mom reluctantly agrees on one condition, that she needs to be back at Misty's house by 11 p.m. Tanya's mother knows they are out, but she doesn't realize that they are at Misty's boyfriend's birthday party, with no plans to leave anytime soon. Sometime after midnight, two boys they just met at a party give them a ride. They drop Tanya and Misty off at Misty's house, but the place was dark. Her parents aren't home, so instead of calling it a night, the girls decide to walk to another friend's place to keep the party going. That decision feels so familiar. I can remember being a teenager and not wanting the night to end. You think you're safe in your own hometown. You think the worst thing that can ever happen is your parents catching you breaking curfew. But for Tanya and Misty, that short walk through Abbotsford's quiet, damp streets would change everything. Because someone else is out there that night. A man, a predator, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. As the girls walk past a park, the man steps out of the bushes, baseball bat in hand, and orders the girls into the clearing. His voice is cold and steady, and he demands them to undress. Terrified, Tanya starts following his orders immediately. She unbuttons her shirt, trembling, hoping maybe if she complies, they will survive. The man sets the aluminum bat down to fumble with his belt buckle. And that's when Misty makes a decision. She is going to fight. She lunges for the bat, grips it tight, and swings with everything she has. The bat cracks against his arm. For a heartbeat, she thinks she might have a chance. But he is bigger, stronger, and fueled by rage. He wrestles the bat back and turns it on her. Misty later recalls seeing the outline of her high school through the shrubs, the familiar building in the distance as he raises the bat, and the blows come. She counts 7 in total, crashing against her skull. And then, darkness. Back at MSA Hospital, doctors know right away they can't handle her injuries. The damage to her skull is catastrophic. Swelling, bleeding, pressure building inside her brain. They stabilize her just enough to transfer her to Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster, a bigger trauma center. There, a neurosurgeon performs emergency brain surgery. The goal? Relieve the pressure, stop the bleeding, give her a chance. Misty slips into a coma. October 14th, 1995, the morning after the attack. 2 fishermen are walking the banks of the Vedder River just outside of Chilliwack, BC, which is about 25 kilometers or 15 miles from Abbotsford. They spot a blouse tangled in the brush, and it is soaked in blood. Alarmed, they call the RCMP, and Constable Kevin McLeod is the first on scene. At first, it looks like just one item of clothing, but then McLeod spots another, and then he walks a little ways and another. It was a trail. Piece by piece, he follows it. A blouse, a bra, jeans, underwear, each one bloodier than the last. He moves carefully through the wet thickets, the ground soft beneath his boots, and the smell of damp earth and river rising up. He stops to mark each piece of evidence. McLeod follows the path until it opens onto the riverbank, and there, face down in the shallows, lay Tanya Smith, naked, dead, 16 years old. Once Constable Kevin McLeod found Tanya's body, investigators move in to secure the area. They treat the Vedder Riverbank like sacred ground, every inch a potential clue. In 1995, crime scene work was slow and methodical. There were no drones to scan the area, no instant DNA databases to search. Everything had to be photographed, logged, and collected by hand. One of the first things they noticed was the tire tracks pressed into that mud. The grooves were sharp and clear, showing the distinct tread of a vehicle that had been there recently. And beside him, there were boot prints, heavy impressions in the wet ground. Investigators used plaster to make casts. They pour it carefully into the tracks, wait for it to harden, and then lift the molds from the earth. These casts could later be compared against a suspect's tires and shoes. a crucial link if they ever find the right person. Investigators checked for fingerprints, and when her clothing was tested, forensic techs found tiny yellow fibers clinging to the fabric of her blood-soaked blouse. But the most critical evidence was on Tanya herself. The autopsy reveals head injuries, fractures to both arms, scrapes across her back consistent with being dragged. She had signs of being raped, and there is a distinct bite mark on her right breast that is swabbed for saliva, collecting what they hoped might be DNA. They also recover semen from her body, and this too is preserved and sent to the lab. But the most devastating revelation was this. Tanya had still been alive when she was dumped into the Vedder River. Whether she drowned on her own or was held under, investigators could never say for certain. The thought of that stays with me. Tanya, broken, battered, terrified, still breathing when her body hit the water. It makes me wonder if the killer thought she was dead when he put her by the water, or did he actually hold her under to make sure she was dead? With Tanya gone and Misty barely surviving, police needed a face. They sat with Misty and built a composite sketch. Newspapers ran it, TV stations broadcast it. Abbotsford residents studied it like their lives depended on it, and tips poured in. And then something alarming surfaced. Just a year earlier, in September 1994, a 19-year-old woman in Abbotsford had been brutally attacked. She'd been out walking between 2 and 3 in the morning when a man jumped her, beat her, and sexually assaulted her. That man was George Evenden. The young woman survived. She reported the assault and gave police a description of her attacker. When Misty's composite sketch hit the papers, it looked enough like him that the dots seemed to connect. Evenden was already under arrest for that 1994 case, and the parallels were chilling. A young woman walking late at night, beaten and sexually assaulted, a bat as the weapon of choice. For a while, Abbotsford breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe the Abbotsford Killer was already in custody. But when the investigators ran his DNA and dental impressions against the evidence from Tanya's case, the results were clear. It wasn't him. Evenden was guilty of another violent crime, but he was not the Abbotsford Killer. And that's what makes this part of the story so unsettling. The community thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. But when Evenden was cleared, that brief relief evaporated, and the real killer was still out there, taunting and waiting for his next move. While police were still combing the Vedder riverbank, photographing evidence, casting tire tracks, swabbing Tanya's body for DNA, the killer was already a step ahead. Because just 4 days after Tanya's murder, the Abbotsford Police Department's phone rang. On the line was a man. His voice was steady, almost casual. He describes the attack, and he mentions details only the killer would know, including the bite mark investigators had deliberately kept out of the press. A detective tries to keep him talking. At one point they ask, "Who is this?" The man replies flatly, "I'm the killer." I get chills just thinking about that. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending. He wanted them to know exactly who was in control. And he wasn't done. The calls kept coming, sometimes to police, sometimes to local media, but always taunting, always pushing. Each time, investigators scrambled. They traced the calls to payphones around Abbotsford, sending officers racing through the night. But every time they arrived, the booth was empty. He was already gone. It became a cat and mouse game, and the mouse, the killer, was winning. Then on Halloween night in 1995, the fear escalates. That evening, police receive another chilling call. The man on the line says he is going to kill again that very night. So picture this. The streets of Abbotsford are full of little kids in costumes, parents holding flashlights and candy bags swinging in the dark. And police, knowing there might be another attack, were racing to keep people safe. They flooded the neighborhoods, cruised the streets, and patrolled parks and schools. But the night came and went without another murder. Still, the community was rattled. Abbotsford wasn't just dealing with a killer, they were dealing with a man who wanted to terrorize them. So the investigators launched Operation Mousetrap. Working with BC Tel, the local phone company back in 1995, they began tracking every payphone in the region. The plan was simple. The moment he dialed in, they'd know which booth he was using. But it didn't work. The killer somehow stayed a step ahead, always slipping away before police could close in. And then, months later, his taunts escalated from words on the phone to a physical, horrifying act that shocked the entire community. In the weeks after Tanya's murder, her family held a memorial service at Northview Community Church in Abbotsford. Hundreds gathered, classmates, neighbors, strangers, all united in grief. Police were there too. They set up surveillance, quietly recording everyone who came and went, watching for a killer who might not be able to resist showing up. But on February 17, 1996, 4 months after the murder, Abbotsford police received yet another call. This time, the caller told them to check the parking lot of a local radio station called Star FM. When reporters and police arrived, they found Tanya's headstone stolen from her grave. It had been desecrated, covered in threats. Scrolled across it were chilling words aimed directly at Misty Cockerell. It states, quote, "She will not be the first, she will not be the last. You won't find me one day, Misty," end quote. It was a grotesque escalation, no longer just phone calls, but a physical violation of Tanya's memory and a direct threat to her surviving best friend. This moment is where the cruelty of the Abbotsford Killer becomes undeniable. It wasn't even enough that he had taken Tanya's life and nearly killed Misty. He wanted to keep hurting them, even after death. From the very beginning, investigators had tried everything to get physical evidence off the killer. They dusted the crime scene, they examined the payphones he'd used, they'd even checked the envelopes he had mailed. But nothing, no usable prints were found. At one point, in one of his taunting phone calls, the killer even mocked them, saying, quote, "Do you think I'm stupid enough to leave prints?" End quote. For a while, it seemed like he was right. But then came another escalation. In the W Know docuseries, investigators state that in early 1996, a family in Abbotsford was jolted awake when something smashed through their living room window. It was a wrench. Wrapped around the handle with black electrical tape was a white envelope, and inside was a note. Scrawled in bold black marker across a photo of Misty Cockerell, it read, quote, "Lucky to be alive," end quote. The envelope also contained a letter in which the killer bragged about 3 other attacks on young women from the year before, crimes that had never even been reported. The wording was so strange and so precise that investigators began to wonder if the killer could actually be one of their own. But this time, finally, he slipped. When forensic technicians carefully unwrapped the tape from the envelope, they found it, a single fingerprint. It wasn't enough to identify him yet, but it was the break they had been waiting for. And that's the thing about men like this. Their arrogance always catches up with them. He thought he was smarter than everyone, but every time he called, every taunt, every letter, he was giving police more to work with. By the spring of 1996, Abbotsford police were exhausted. They had phone calls, they had letters, they even had a fingerprint from the wrench incident, but they still didn't have a name. So investigators made a bold move. On April 30th, 1996, they held a press conference and released a recording of the killer's voice to the public. It was a gamble, hoping someone out there would recognize the voice that had been terrorizing Abbotsford for months. And guess what? It worked. Within just 3 hours of the broadcast, the police tip line rang. It was a woman's voice on the other end, and she said the voice on the tape sounded just like her son. Her name was Shirley Driver, and her son's name was Terry. Now, as a mother myself, I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been for Shirley. To sit at home, hear a killer's voice on the news, and realize it sounds like your own child. And then to pick up the phone and call police to turn in your son. It's unthinkable, but it was exactly what broke this case wide open. When police got the call from Shirley Driver, they immediately started digging into who her son was. On the surface, Terry Arnold Driver looked ordinary. He was married to a woman named Val. They had tied the knot in a Burnaby church on July 7th, 1990, just 3 weeks after meeting. Together they had 2 children. Terry also worked at an Abbotsford printing company. He paid his bills, raised his kids, bowled in community leagues. His father, Arnold Driver, was a respected Vancouver police officer, considered a hero by many, and Terry himself had also been a Boy Scout leader. But there were cracks. Neighbors have reported him doing strange things, like standing at his window and masturbating while others could see. Once, while cleaning a gun, it went off accidentally, firing a bullet through his backyard fence. And then there was his obsession with police. Terry had ADHD and Tourette's syndrome, and though he applied to be an officer multiple times, he was rejected. Instead, he became a police wannabe. He collected scanners and radios, and at night he'd drive through Abbotsford listening for sirens, showing up at crime scenes just to watch the real officer work. He knew their codes, their blind spots. And that's what chills me the most. By day, he was just another guy working at a print shop, a husband, a dad. But by night, he was out there pretending to be a cop, chasing emergencies, and eventually hunting. Police wasted no time. They went straight to his house to interview him. But Driver was not cooperative. He stonewalled, gave them nothing. He thought he was still in control, the way he had been for months. At home, though, his family was pressuring him. He had dragged their name into the spotlight, and now they were desperate for him to clear it. They begged him to submit his fingerprints to prove he wasn't the killer. And on May 3rd, 1996, Terry Driver finally did. When investigators told him the results, his reaction was chilling. The print he'd left on the tape that wrapped the wrench, it matched his fingerprint. Driver was reportedly smug, even surprised, like he couldn't believe he had slipped. And then police pulled out another card. They had already checked their surveillance tapes from Tanya's funeral months earlier, where they'd secretly recorded everyone coming and going. And there he was, Terry Driver, sitting in the pews at Northview Community Church with his 2 young children by his side. Exactly as investigators had suspected, the killer couldn't resist inserting himself into the grieving. From there, the evidence only stacked higher. His teeth matched the bite mark. His DNA matched the semen found in Tanya's body, with odds of 1 in 1.7 trillion. No doubt there. On May 3rd, 1996, Terry Driver is arrested. Here's the thing about that early sketch, the one based on Misty's memory. It didn't look anything like Terry Driver, not even close. But that made sense, because Misty had survived 7 blows to the head with a bat, brain surgery, and a coma. Her recollection was fragmented at best. The sketch sent investigators chasing George Evenden, a known offender, with a bat, but DNA cleared him, which was another dead end. Yet, while the sketch misled, the profiler was dead on. He said the killer would be compulsive, obsessed with police, drawn back into the case, and that's exactly who Terry was. He was compulsive, he was obsessed, and he showed up at Tanya's funeral unable to stay away. And that's the cruelty of it. Sitting in a church surrounded by Tanya's grieving family with your 2 young children, pretending to mourn, knowing all along that he was the one who put her there. After months of terror, police finally had their man in custody, and somewhere that day, a phone must have rung. On the other end was Misty Cockrell, the girl who had staggered into MSA Hospital with a fractured skull, the girl who endured brain surgery, a coma, and months of recovery, the girl who had been threatened again and again and again by what we know as the Abbotsford Killer. I imagine the officers told her the words she had been waiting to hear. "We've arrested him. You're safe now." That moment gives me chills, because for Misty, survival wasn't just about dragging herself to the hospital that night. It was about living every day afterward in fear of the phone calls, the headstone, the threats with her name on them, and finally hearing that the man who had haunted her was behind bars. I can only hope it brought some measure of peace for her. It would be more than a year before the case went to trial. On September 4th, 1997, proceedings began in a New Westminster courtroom. Driver had a choice: trial by jury or trial by judge alone. He chose a judge. Some say it was because he didn't want to face 12 ordinary citizens looking at the brutal details of what he'd done. Others say he thought a single judge would be easier to sway. Driver, in the end, pleads not guilty. And his defense? Driver claimed that he had stumbled upon Tanya and Misty already beaten. He said he hadn't attacked them at all. And then came the part that shocked everyone. He told the court that his Tourette's syndrome and ADHD had compelled him to have sex with Tanya Smith while she was unconscious. Like, it's beyond insulting to Tanya, to Misty, and to anyone living with ADHD or Tourette's. These conditions don't make you a murderer, and they don't make you a rapist. This was Driver trying to twist the narrative even at the very end. But the evidence spoke louder than his excuses. Misty's testimony about the bat, the blows, and her desperate walk to the hospital, the DNA, 1 in 1.7 trillion match, the bite mark, identical to Driver's dental impressions, yellow fibers from his car matched to Tanya's blood-soaked blouse, and the fingerprint from the wrench. Piece by piece, it all built a picture that Driver couldn't explain away. The judge finds him guilty. Driver was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 20 years for the murder of Tanya Smith, and 10 years for the attempted murder of Misty Cockrell. He was also convicted of 2 earlier assaults on women in Abbotsford that he had bragged about in his letter to police. And because of the sheer brutality of his crimes, he was designated a dangerous offender, one of the most serious labels in Canadian law, reserved for criminals who are considered too high a risk to ever be released. In the end, it was science, patience, and Misty's survival that put him away. He thought he was smarter than everyone else, but his own arrogance, taunts, phone calls, and showing up at Tanya's funeral became the very things that helped seal his fate. For Abbotsford, the arrest of Terry Driver in 1996 ended almost 2 years of terror. But the story doesn't end there. Misty Cockrell survived. But survival didn't mean life went back to normal. She endured surgeries, rehabilitation, memory lapses, and the weight of losing her best friend. For years, she lived under the shadow of what Driver had done. But Misty also found purpose. She turned her survival into a way to help others, devoting her life to supporting people living with trauma. In interviews, she's spoken about carrying Tanya's memory forward, making sure what happened to them was never forgotten. And for Terry Driver, he spent the rest of his life in prison. In 2006, 10 years into his sentence, he did apply for a parole, and he was denied. He applied again later, and again he was denied. And each time, the message was the same: he was too dangerous to be released. And then, in August 2021, news broke. Terry Driver had died in prison of natural causes. He was 56 years old. For many in Abbotsford, and especially for Misty, the news brought relief. Relief that he could never hurt another woman again. When I think back on this case, I think of those two girls, Tanya and Misty. Tanya's life was stolen in the most brutal way possible, and Misty, who not only survived, but stood strong enough to testify, to face him in court, and to rebuild her life. Tanya Smith and Misty Cockrell were just teenagers in 1995, best friends walking home from a party, and in the end, their bond, one taken, one surviving, became the reason a community demanded justice and the reason a monster was finally put away. Thanks for tuning in to Valley of Secrets. Much of today's episode was researched through archival newspapers, CBC and CTV coverage, and the investigation discovery docuseries The Devil You Know. All source information is in the show notes. I'd love it if you'd help spread the word. Follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Valley of Secrets Podcast. And if you can, share an episode on your very own social media. Every share keeps these victim stories alive. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcast. It really makes a difference. I'll see you next week. Stay aware, stay safe, stay curious.